once again, it's a joy to have all of you here, especially those who are visiting with Emmanuel Early Learning Center. It's a real pleasure to have you here. I can't tell you what a joy it is to be able to work with the kids every Friday morning and do chapel and to share the love of God and the love of Jesus with them. And ILC is a very significant part of the ministry of Emmanuel. In fact, we're all part in this together. And together we join in the mission of the congregation and the school to introduce all people to Jesus Christ and the exhilarating power and undefeatable joy that he brings to life. And it is an absolute pleasure, again, to have you here. If you're coming in for the first time, this is a second in a series of sermons I've rendered in Easter season called We Shall Overcome, with the subtitle, From Difficulties Come Miracles. Last week we talked about overcoming darkness, and we talked about the resurrection of Jesus. Jesus rising from the dead can empower all who dare to believe the spiritual brawn to thwart any darkness that would try to take away our joy. Today's theme is We Shall Overcome Hypocrisy. That should be easy. Well, maybe not. We're going to see what we can do. We're going to be reading 3 verses, working with 3 verses of the lesson we read earlier. If you have a Bible and like to take it out and turn to 1 John, or if you have it on your iPhone, your iPad, we're going to read 3 verses, chapter 2, verses 9, 10, and 11. And I'm going to put up on the screens the New Living Translation. And it goes like this. If anyone claims I am living in the light, but hates his Christian brother or sister, that person is still living in darkness. Anyone who loves another brother or sister is living in the light and doesn't cause others to stumble. But anyone who hates brother or sister is still living and walking in darkness. And such a person doesn't know the way to go, having been blinded by the darkness. So I'll tell you what, before we get started, I want to ask you 3 questions, and we're going to take a vote. So if you would, raise your hand. First of all, how many of you like hanging around people that are hypocritical? Okay, that would be a 0. We'll write that down. And how many of you try very hard in your life not to be hypocritical? That would be 99.2%. Okay, number 3. How many of you have never been hypocritical? Okay. You can see we have our work cut out for us here. But fear not, it's going to be okay in the end. And when we're done, I promise to get you out of here before lunch. So, first of all, from my experience, everyone is a hypocrite. I kind of knew what the answers to those questions were going to be when I asked them. And maybe it's my religious upbringing that I was brought up where just everybody seems to be critical. And it seems like whenever you talk about hypocrites, people pick on Christians, on church people, on religious people, and not just Christians. I mean, look at the Muslims who are, ideally it's a religion of peace, and they're using their religion to blow people up and cut people's heads off. Well, Christians are kind of, not quite that bad, but there have always been people. In the Old Testament, there was this guy named David. You heard about him. And he wrote one of his songs, "For I am always aware of your," he's talking to God, "of your unfailing love," he says. "And I lived according to your truth, and I do not spend time with liars or go along with hypocrites." This is the same guy that fell in lust with his neighbor, saw her sunbathing. Her name was Bathsheba, decided he had to have her as a wife, and so arranged for her husband, who was one of his generals in his army, to go into battle where he would be sure to be killed, and he was, and they got married and lived happily ever after. Even the most famous king of all time was a hypocrite. And when Jesus was around, it was the religious people who gave him the most trouble. In fact, he said to them one time in the Gospel of Mark, he said, "You hypocrites, Isaiah was right when he said about you, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." And then we've all heard about the preachers who preach against sleeping in other beds beside your own, and they're caught with prostitutes, or these days it's the guys who stand up firmly and loudly and obnoxiously against people who are gays and lesbians and later are arrested soliciting male prostitutes. I don't know. It's bad. And that's not to mention just normal everyday church people who have been born again, washed in the blood, or baptized in Christ Jesus, as we sing in the Lutheran Church, who refuse to forgive people who have done them wrong, or who gossip unrelentingly about someone else, who are so critical of other people. You wonder kind of how they can live with themselves. And I gotta tell you just straight up, I'm a hypocrite too. I'm a little bit worse hypocrite than I thought, though. I did one of those online quizzes. Do you ever do this? You know, they ask you questions and you punch the answer, it tells you, how you did. So I took this hypocrite test, punched in my answers, and I tried to be honest and punched them in, and my score came back and it said, "You are a 40% Christian." You need to turn your life over to Jesus Christ, because right now you're going to hell. And right before I started to think, well, I'll see you there, I stopped myself because that would further my chances. But it's not just religious people. There's the Greenpeace activist who takes a jet to a conference on saving the environment. There's the chain smoker who runs in the heart race. There's the one who volunteers for Habitat for Humanity, but is a hypocrite because he never offers his home to somebody who needs a place to stay. Or the soccer mom who is active in the Global Peace Organization, who reams out the referee at her son's soccer game because he called foul on little Bobby. We're all hypocrites. So the first step, I think, of overcoming hypocrisy is to join the human race and admit we're all hypocrites. St. Paul actually talked about that in the book of Romans. He said, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Some other helpful hints, once we admit it, is to look at other things and see what's going on in the world. So I went to this website called Kids World. I don't know if any of your parents have your kids. Your kids are probably too young, but it's for like teens. Oh, did you ever see this saying? So you're saying I'm a judgmental hypocrite? How very non-judgmentally hypocritical of you. So anyway, I went to this kids, it's called Kids World. They got all sorts of different things. But one of the things they've got is an advice column, and it's called Dish It. And I assume that means, tell me your problems and I'll dish it out to you and how you need to fix it. I think that's it. So anyway, some girl wrote in and she said, "Dear Dish It, how do I stop being a hypocrite? I am a hypocrite," she says, and let's just say this. I got invited to Anna's party, and I went and I had a good time, but the thing is, with Anna, I always talk bad about Faye, and this time I talked about Anna with Faye, and I feel really bad, but I'm still friends with both of them, but what should I do to stop being a hypocrite? I mean, I really don't try to be mean. Love ya, signed, Secret Lover. And this is what the answer comes back. Dear Secret Lover, so far you've been lucky that no one spilled the beans about your backstabbing. But rest assured that if you keep on trash talking, you won't just lose one of your friends. You will lose both. No one likes a gossip, especially when you don't have reason for it. Both of these girls apparently are your friends, so if you value your friendship at all, you will zip those loose lips of yours. There's really one simple way of not being a hypocrite, and that's to stop being one. Talking about your friends behind their back is not a disease that you can get medication for. You just have to have the willpower to be a better person. So there you have it. Stop doing it, but here's some more tricks. First of all, admit that you don't know everything. Now, I know that's hard. I mean, we like to think that we do, but there's always things that we don't know. We don't know other people. We don't know how they were brought up. We don't know what the values were that their parents instilled in them, and how those values got skewed and changed as time went on in life. We don't know about that. So we've got to be sensitive to the fact that we just don't know everything. A second thing is to realize that we are all different, and yet we are all equal. No one's exactly the same. Have you heard that saying, we dislike in others what we dislike most about ourselves? That's not just psychobabble, it's true. And the more that we are secure in our own validity, the more we can validate others. That's true. A third suggestion is before you pass judgment on someone, first ask yourself, are there any extenuating circumstances? I read this week, a sad, funny story about a woman that was having lunch in the mall, and she noticed this young guy just a few tables away staring at her chest. And he did not move. He just kept staring while he ate his lunch, and finally infuriated her so bad that she went over to his table and said, "You've got to stop that, you creepy pervert," and reamed him out and said, "You've got to get out of here." And so the young man said, "I'm sorry," and he put on his sunglasses and picked up his blind man's cane and walked out. You should have heard what other people in the mall said to her about being mean to a blind guy. There's sometimes extenuating circumstances. So there's this one pastor who was preaching a sermon, it was getting kind of long. There were two people sitting in the back and they kept talking, and he actually would stare at them and he'd start talking about people talking while other people were talking, and just everything, and it was really blatant about it. They never stopped. But after the service, he found out that one of the people listening in the back was deaf. And the other person was relating the sermon to her. There could always be extenuating circumstances. A fourth is to realize and be open about our struggles. I mean, we all have issues. And there's something amazing that happens when we admit that we are human, and we share our struggles with others. It seems to bring out the best in us. That'll help, but we still haven't overcome the hypocrisy, because we're going out here this morning and we're working on this thing and we're still hypocrites. There's something deeper that needs to happen. And I wrote this series, We Shall Overcome, thinking that together, you and me, if we work really hard, we can make the world a better place. And then we come upon this hypocrisy thing and realize, you know what? I can't stop it. I can't. And it's really embarrassing sometimes that I can't stop it. So it's something more is needed. And that's where the message of Easter comes in. That's where the message of Jesus comes, that we are forgiven. It's not just you and me, but it's us combined with Jesus that makes it happen. There's this great story in the Gospel of John, it's chapter 8, about this woman who was caught in the act of having an affair. I mean, we don't know what was going on, what the circumstances were. We don't know if it was something that had been going on forever, or maybe it was just a one-time thing. Her husband treated her horribly, and she ran into this guy that made her feel like she was worthwhile and interesting. We don't know what the circumstances were, but somehow they in a fit of passion, they both made a very, very bad choice. And they got caught right in the act. And the people drugged this woman. They took her and they brought her out into public, most likely without many clothes on, and threw her at the face of Jesus. And they were demanding that Jesus would condemn her. Can you imagine what might have been going on in her mind? Oh, I can't believe this happened. I can't believe I did this. How did I get to this point in my life? Surely God nor anyone else will ever be able to forgive me for what I have done. I cannot cannot believe it. I've gone too far. And those are very real thoughts. Perhaps you've had them yourselves. You got caught in an act of hypocrisy. I know I have, and I have just died on the inside. I'm just feeling dead. And I realize that I have become my own accuser, my own jury, my own judge, my own executioner. Sometimes I will lie awake in the middle of the night, replaying these tapes of what I have done and what has happened, so I can understand just a little bit of what was going on with this woman as she lay at Jesus' feet. Shame and guilt are powerful prisons, but it doesn't have to be that way, because there is no jury that's declaring you guilty. There is no one who is condemning you. We read the passage from Romans just a little bit earlier. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But there's a passage that comes right after that, where St. Paul writes, "Yet God with undeserved kindness declares that we are righteous, that we are not guilty." He did this through Jesus Christ when he freed us from the penalty of our sins. Those are the words that would change this woman's life. But before she heard Jesus say these words, she saw Jesus look at the entire crowd, the mean, screaming, vulgar people with rocks ready to stone her. And he looked at them, perhaps even compassionately, and said, "Let any one of you who has never done anything wrong, who's perfect, I would like you to throw the first stone." And one by one, they went away. And the woman looked up, and they were all gone. And Jesus said to her, "Where are your accusers?" And she said, "They're all gone." And Jesus said, "Then I don't condemn you either. Go and sin no more." Can you imagine the look on that woman's face when she realized that her sentence was not guilty? We have been given that same verdict. We have got the word that we have been set free. Are you tired of beating yourself up about your past? When are we going to stop and take on forgiveness? When are we going to stop being our own judge and jury? Because if you look at the jury box, it's empty. If you go to the bench, there's no one with a club saying you're guilty. There's merely the love of Jesus Christ saying, "You are forgiven. You are mine."